We're not used to this being this loud. So, good evening. And first off, I'd like to just thank the Board of Education for allowing the Board of Finance to use the space this evening. So thank you for the invite and we appreciate it. My name is Tyler Griffin. I'm the chairman of the Board of Finance for the town of Windham, and I'll call our special meeting to order at 7:05. I don't have to hold it like our former one. So we're just living the dream. So our main order of business tonight is a discussion on the fiscal year 26 Board of Education budget. And what we typically have done is we'll let the Board of Ed folks come on up and give us a presentation, and we'll proceed to Q&A. Everyone's comfortable with how we did it last week with the town government. Kind of just took a couple of questions, moved on down to a couple of questions from everybody. After tonight, there'll be another meeting where we'll kind of discuss the budgets again. Any questions that are asked this evening that the Board of Ed is not comfortable answering or doesn't have an answer, by all means, that's totally fine. An answer in writing within a time period is totally acceptable. I don't want you to feel pressure to answer a question you're unsure of. And then a couple of weeks, we'll have another meeting. And what we do at that meeting is we'll take a vote on our budget recommendations that will then lead to a public hearing. That way folks have an idea of what the Board of Finance is thinking and can give us opinions on what our original thoughts were. And then after that public hearing is when we'll set our final amounts that will go out to referendum in early May. So like I said, tonight is just the presentation, some questions and answers between us and the board, and then we'll end the evening with public comment and then adjourn for this evening. So without any further ado, I'll invite our lovely Board of Ed folks on up. I know we have Mark Doyle already up here, and I'll defer to you, Chairwoman Lynn.
Do you need help, Mark? Good evening. It's nice to see the Board of Finance here, and we're happy to host you anytime you need to be hosted. It's just a nice setup for viewing and showing slides. You can see them from where you're sitting, and the audience can see them behind you. So thank you for coming tonight. My name's Lynn Ide. I'm chair of the Board of Ed, and I want to thank my fellow Board of Ed members who are here with me tonight: Paula Haney, Alicia Rivera, Mary Gallucci, and Mark Doyle, the chair of the Finance Committee and the Ad Hoc Elementary School Consolidation Committee. We are here to give a presentation tonight on our budget and sort of the story behind the budget. And then we'll be here to answer questions. I think Mark and I are going to field most of the questions tonight with support from staff as needed. Mark?
Thank you, Lynn. Again, thank you for coming tonight. We're going to try and give you a detailed presentation. We're going to start with hopefully letting you see some of the things that we are already accomplishing with our students and with the programs that we put forth, and then give you the explanation of the why we need to continue to support the education within the Windham, and why it's important for us to maintain the positive direction that we're working with in order to raise our test scores and bring about successful students.
So first thing I'm going to do is call up the acting superintendent, Neil Weathers.
Good evening, Board of Finance. Thank you again for being here and letting us present our budget to you. Before I start, I just want to, like our board chair said, thank the entire Board of Education. It is proud to serve them in this role as acting superintendent. I'm just really grateful for this opportunity. I couldn't be here without my cabinet. In particular, I'm going to point out Rita Parsiak, who without her, this budget wouldn't exist. And I just, all of my cabinet put many, many hours in for what you're about to see and in the budget book that is presented before you. And in addition to that, I just want to give a big shout out to my administrators, my staff, all of the public, parents, and students that are here tonight, whether they're watching or in some of the cases presenting. I'm just really honored. And what I told our staff, which is from the bottom of my heart, is that I think coming to these, regardless of what you think, if you're for or against the budget, you get to learn about the budget, inform thoughts and questions. And I think it's a great process to engage in. So with that, I will jump into the purpose of what I hope to accomplish tonight. Yes.
Sorry, the screen is not showing what's on there. So is it supposed to be, or?
It should, yes.
So we don't see that. We just see like, welcome to Smart Hub.
Oh,
So I don't want to necessarily crank our necks if we.
make sure there's a beautiful slide there and there's some
I
nice.
am, I
bullets.
certainly am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. That's simple. We had to press the right button. All right. Thanks, Neil. Thank you.
We've added one tech to our budget. Okay, just kidding. All right, so without further ado, I just really want to talk about the purpose. We want to share with you, there's just the richness, you'll hear about this, of our students, our school community, and the programs that we offer. Windham is an amazing place. I've been here for nearly a decade now, and just the things that happen here are really amazing, and things that don't happen in other places in the state, and things that don't happen in other places, actually, frankly, in the region or country. I want to make sure we highlight our successes, and I'm going to have some guest speakers to do that and talk about our successes and sought after programs, and just really show you why we need the budget that we recommended, and to emphasize that our students really deserve nothing less. So just a quick overview of Windham Public Schools is we have a population of approximately 3,200 students, and they represent roughly 2,400 families in the town and in towns that visit, for example, that participate in our Barrows Magnet school. We have over 1,000 English learners, or about 1 in 3 of our students are English learners, and about 1 out of 5 of our students are either IEP, students with an IEP or individualized education plan, or students with a 504. And we currently, as of today, have 9 schools located on 8 campuses. So our students, the demographics of our students, we basically, 4 out of 5 of our students come from a minority population. 73% of those are Latinx, and primarily those students come from the US, Puerto Rico, and numerous Central and South American countries. Half of our K-12 students have a home language other than English, and about 95% of those students, that language is Spanish, although we also have Quiche speakers, Arabic, and Urdu. And again, about 1 of 3 of our students are English learners, and about 1 out of 4 of our students participate in a dual language program, which is amazing. So just to describe our students, they are culturally and linguistically rich. They are children of multi-generational interconnectedness. What you'll often hear about is when you talk to the parents of our students is how they went here, or a relative of theirs went there, and the rich stories of our students and their families is very important to us as we try to make them the best possible students and best possible adults for the Windham community. And they are members of the global majority, they are digital learners, and they are global citizens. And the backdrop of this, before we really jump into some brags, some points of pride, some celebrations, I wanted to talk about Windham Public Schools is going through a lot of change right now, and some of you are aware of it, but I think it's really important to highlight all of that change. We are amidst an elementary consolidation planning, including a proposed elementary building project. In June 2025, Windham Center School will close. I want to just give a shout out A majority of their staff is here tonight in full support, and I'm very appreciative of them amidst this big change in the history of the district. We have, as you might have heard, that I am the acting superintendent, or as I sometimes humorously say, the temporary superintendent. We are in the middle of a superintendent search, and our Board of Ed is hoping to put a candidate forward on July of 2025. The grade 5 will return to Windham Middle School in August of 2025 because that's what the school was built to do and house, and that is our intention. And then hopefully I will successfully steward with my Board of Ed to pass our first post-ESSER budget. It is the first time we will have no ESSER funds in this budget. And before I go to the next slide, I'm just going to thank you. I'm going to just give an introduction. The students that are about to present our brags, our points of pride, are all high school students here at Windham High School. So they're on home turf, which I'm happy to say. They're all amidst taking their SATs and their next generation science tests. So we're going to cut them some slacks. They might be under a little bit of testing pressure, or maybe they're just much calmer than I used to be when I took those tests. But anyways, they're going to celebrate, but they represent many of the things they're going to talk about. They are your AP students, your honor students, they're your athletes. A couple of them will be in the specialized programs we highlight. A couple of them are dual language students. They really represent the gambit of the high school experience. And just getting to talking to them yesterday when we were rehearsing, they're just a great group of 7 kids. So I'm going to turn it over and they will introduce themselves. And I'm just going to give them a little round of applause to welcome them. Hold on 1 second. You go.
My name is Lucas. I'm a freshman. We are very lucky to have an early childhood program that serves 240 of our youngest learners. They are a new facility here developing foundational skills, preparing them for their future in our Windham Public Schools classrooms. These programs are very popular with families, and each year we will have waiting lists.
My name is Damiano. I'm a sophomore here at Windham High. In Windham, we pride ourselves in meeting the many unique needs of our students. There are many specialized programs that help us accomplish this important part of our mission. They include programs for students with autism and emotional disabilities, as well as an assisted work program for 18 to 21-year-olds.
Sorry. Good evening. My name is Nayeli and I'm in grade 10. Capitalizing on the richness of our student population, we boast the oldest and most accomplished dual language program in the state of Connecticut. In these programs, both native English speakers and Spanish speakers learn in the 2 languages and cultures. The results are amazing. By program's end, not only are students bilingual, they are biliterate. As a result, families seek out the program and 1 in 4 students are participating in them.
My name is Felix. I'm a junior. Student academic achievement continues to improve here in Windham, specifically in grades 3rd through 8th. We're leading the district reference group on the Smarter Balance assessment for both math and ELA. This is shown here for grade 3 and grade 4 ELA, with Windham Public Schools being the top line. On this slide, you can see that our scores in grade 5 math and grade 8 ELA are significantly better than those in our reference group, which include the cities of Bridgeport, Hartford, New Britain, New Haven, New London, and Waterbury.
My name is Jolie Mar. I'm in grade 11th. We are so proud to share that Windham Public Schools graduation grades are the highest they've been in 5 years. For our students who take non-traditional pathways to success, Windham Phoenix Academy provides an alternative high school program. Phoenix proudly graduated its first class last year, with more on the way this spring.
My name is Alexander. I'm in grade 11. The high school offers many rigorous classes to students, including honors, advanced placement, as well as UConn and Eastern QCC dual enrollment. In addition to being academically challenging, many of these student courses provide our students with college credit while still in high school. This is a cost saver for our students that attend college. In this slide, it's about the seal of biliteracy. Over the 3 years, the numbers of students that have earned the distinguished seal of biliteracy has doubled.
Yeah. My name is Bobby, and I'm in 10th. We are very proud of our graduation rate and the students that are accepted to college. Our Windham students are being offered placement in competitive universities and colleges throughout the country.
So I just really want to thank our high school students again. And what I'm going to do now is offer our Windham Federation of Teachers President, Cami Nyland-Poirier, to talk a little bit about our staff and class sizes.
Good evening. As you can see on the slide, our teacher retention rate has improved for the last, my goodness, 5 years. Since 2020, the 5-year teacher retention rate has improved by 5% here in Windham. And when you look at our Windham Public Schools staff, we certainly are Windham. As shown in the red, that's the percentage of staff that live here in Windham. I am one of them. Started here as a student and I never left. I love Windham. My heart is here with the students, my colleagues, the support I've gotten. So you can see that a lot of our staff feel the same. And one thing that we have noticed is that Windham is trying and maintaining appropriate class sizes. They try to maintain a class average size that allow teachers to meet all of the diverse needs of our students. And they really try to maintain class sizes of 22 or fewer students throughout the district. I know that Neil has he definitely has the pulse of class size. And whenever class sizes start to approach that 22 number, it is definitely recognized, and we try to make accommodations, and that's something that as a teacher we're very appreciative of. I think that's mine. I'm done.
All right. Now, the next part of the presentation, I really just want to talk about the elements of a school budget and just to talk about what goes into that and speak to it. And I'm going to call up my interim assistant superintendent, Beth Brene, and I'm also going to call up the board chair again to speak about this part.
Good evening, I'm Beth Brene. I'm going to just talk a little bit about the parts of a school budget. We've got some general points and some Windham specific points here, and our intention is to educate about the formation of a budget. So as you can see we've noted 3 different parts of the budget. We've talked about how Connecticut schools are funded by a combination of funds. Some of those are town funds and others are special funds. You can see the breakdown includes education cost sharing as well as other grant funds. In Windham, 39.2% of our school district's budget comes from the town funds. Federal and state governments are really the ones that determine federal and state grant formulas and the payment of those funds out to districts or to states and then districts. They're not always guaranteed and mandates are not always funded. Windham is projected to receive approximately $2 million less in this coming year, and 4.8 million less than 2 years ago in these grant funds. I think everyone's really aware that states and local districts are also extremely concerned at this time about the reliability of some of the federal grant funding, which we're super reliant on. Districts like ours and Durg I have more poverty and have more socioeconomic factors that determine funds like this, and we are more reliant on federal and state grant funds. 43% of Windham Public Schools staff positions are not funded by the local education budget, but rather by these grant or supplemental funds.
So what we wanted to do is talk a little bit in these next slides about what's different about a school budget than, say, maybe a town budget. Because so much of our budget is determined by legal requirements and mandates that prevent us from eliminating or reducing essential programming, especially for those students that we identified early on in the presentation that may have particular needs, that rules and regulations require us to provide those services. They cannot be cut. We have to figure out a way to pay for them. And the other thing that happens in all school districts, not just in ours, is that children move in and out of a school district, and we never know as we set a budget for the upcoming year if we're going to get a handful of students that move into the district that have legally required special needs that we need to figure out a way to accommodate. And these requirements impact us in staffing, in homeless and specialized transportation. People in the public and people on the Board of Finance may not know that we have an increase in homeless students in the district, and we are required to provide transportation for them regardless of where they're coming from, like where they're temporarily housed or whatever. We have to provide instructional supplies and equipment, and our facilities have to meet certain codes and requirements. Thank you.
So the remainder of the time, what I'd like to do is speak about our actual 25-26 recommended budget. So, and I believe all of you have seen our Board of Education recommended budget book. The Board of Education recommended budget book puts a 5.8% increase from the previous year. One of the first noticeable things you will see if you were to take categories 1 through 3, they actually represent a 7% increase to the total budget. And obviously 7% is actually greater than the total ask of 5.8%. And furthermore, our employee salaries and benefits actually make up 71.5% of the general funds budget compared to last year's budget ask when it was in the mid, I think 69.3%. There is a projected 0.9%, nearly a full percent decrease actually in all of categories 4 through 13. So basically in everything else except salaries, we're actually asking for less in all those other categories in the budget. This is just a note keeping because I'm sure many of you noticed, like, why is there a 570% increase in equipment? That can be explained. There was an accounting standard change that moved software purchases, I believe, over 5,000. And so from categories 4 and 9, which now show decreases, they all went into 13. But again, they all work out. And as I previously pointed out, categories 4 through 13 are actually showing an overall decrease. The 5.8% increase includes the following. We sometimes talk about these in making the budget called budget assumptions. We assume that we have a projected $950,000 in carryover for Medicaid and IDEA Part B. We have a projected Title I carryover of $271,242. We have, and we've talked about this before at the Board of Finance after taking your feedback, we have a projected 3% attrition reduction for certified staff because after listening to you, we saw like based the previous 3 years that we could do that. We actually received $296,250 in Eversource incentives that was applied for years ago. We're going to apply that to our utilities. And then we also have staff benefit reductions based on the projected staff reductions, which I will speak about in a minute. So these are our current total assumptions. Okay, so this next slide is the assumption that we move to the state partnership plan. This budget is built around the assumption that we will move our employees to the state partnership plan. Obviously, that requires MOUs and work with our unions, but the budget was designed with that in mind. This decision has been reviewed and based on multiple conversations and discussions with the Board of Finance and Town Manager's Office over the past several years. This move results in a projected $340,000 in cost savings versus staying with the current plan. And current insurance plan rates locked in have increased from 9.7 to 11.9%, which is a difference of about $253,000 for us. So some budget barriers and changes was mentioned when I believe Beth was speaking about the parts of our budget. Our grant revenue has a projected decrease of over $2 million. A little bit of that is ESSER. Some of that is our Alliance shortfall and just other grant funding sources. But as you know, 2 million is about 4% of our overall budget ask. Had we had that 2 million, this would be a much different conversation today. We have an 8% increase in transportation, but that is because we had a EastCon transportation rate hike of 4% that actually occurred in the middle of our year after our budget was set. We also have a significant increase in legally required homeless transportation costs. First of all, we want to transport these students so they could receive their services and come to school. But with the increase of the population, there is an increase in transportation cost. We have an increase in certified salaries and non-certified salaries per contracts, the loss of ESSER and the Alliance shortfall. What the Alliance shortfall did for this year and next year, that $500,000 that was an Alliance that we thought we were getting, those were mostly salaries and benefits, or mostly salaries, and then had to be moved into general budget. And then there is an increase to overall employee benefits that you can see in the category 3. We have increased special education needs and costs with at least 25 new students in specialized programs after the 24-25 budget passed, which means, again, legally we're required to provide services, which could be in a required outplacement. It could be a required specialized program. It could be a number of staff required to be with that student. We have closed Windham Center School, and I just want to say that in closing Windham Center School is one of the biggest questions I think you will probably get and the town will probably get and that I have gotten is why aren't you coming in with a lower number? There's a few reasons for that. One, all of the overall costs, including the $2 million loss in grant revenue, is actually greater than the savings or about equal to the savings in closing Windham Center. And not only that, one thing to keep in mind, while we reduced our total net positions, we have 13.2 positions fewer than in last year's budget. The classrooms of students still need classroom teachers that moved to North Windham and Sweeney and the middle school. So there's staff that is still required. So even though the building closed and you saved on facilities and there was some staff savings, you did not completely save on a complete staff because many of those people are still working in the district, and we're very, very happy for that. Just to quickly mention the recommended capital improvements, I believe there's somewhere between 1.2 or $1.3 million of it. Barrow STEM Academy, $720,000 for rooftop heating and cooling unit replacements. Cooling unit replacements, there we go. 48,000 for paver on walkways and back of the building. North Windham, $110,000 for replacement of new sewage pump pit. And just again, a question that we get, so I'm going to see if I can answer a question before it's asked. Everyone's like, well, if you consolidate a school, why do you need to do that? There is no way that that will survive the existing equipment before we build a new school. And I don't know how to say this or be gross. That's something we do not want to fall apart while we're operating our system. All right, next slide, please. Windham Middle School, $300,000 in library media center upgrades. Now that we're going to have grades 5 through 8, there's sections we want to dedicate for grades 5 and 8, new shelving, new furniture, and a makerspace room. A facilities department, we wanted $89,000 for a new truck with a Reading body, V-plow and sander. This is an ongoing each year we're trying to add one to update our current fleet of maintenance trucks. And that concludes my presentation. I just want to thank you, Board of Finance, for being a good audience. Thank you, audience, for being a good audience. And I am going to excuse our high schoolers because many of them actually have to take the SATs or NGSS, and we really want their scores to keep going up and we want them to do as good as they can do. So I just one more time want to say thank you. And oh yeah, and I was going to say, obviously, even though maybe I want to sneak out, I will stay and answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Mark and I are going to field questions from you all with help from Neil and Rita and anybody else in the cabinet as needed. But Mark, you could just sit there. That's probably easier for you, right? So we're going to tag team. So let's open it up. And the budget book is a pretty big book. I don't know where you want to start or what questions you have for us.
Thank you, Lynn, Neil, our students that are leaving. Thank you for the presentation, and our other assistant presenters that came up. We really appreciate it. I just want to remind the Board of Finance and folks in the audience that unlike the town government budget, we just give them, in the referendum, we'll just give the Board of Ed a bottom line. We don't control how they spend their money at all. We just give them a bottom line. The town government, we have a little more say in that. So just keep that in mind as we go through this process. But I'm happy to go down the line or start with someone and move along and ask a couple of questions, keep the ball rolling, and then we'll go until our questions are answered, and we'll go from there for this evening. So who would like to go first on the board? Anybody? Oh, I had a feeling it'd be you, Jay. You can just press the button once. It should be green on the bottom, and then you're good to go.
Well, I do have a few questions, obviously. I'm new to the board, although I've been on the Board of Education before. Just want to remind people, last year, if you live in Windham, we had a major tax increase, which is probably the biggest tax increase I've seen in my 40, 50 years in public service. So to go through that again is not going to be pretty. I think everybody here realizes we want quality education for our kids. That's a priority for everybody here. But we also have a responsibility to the taxpayers in the town. So we all have a big responsibility here, and I just want to make everybody aware that I don't think that the town of Windham can afford another major tax increase this year. So I do have a few questions. I'm short, so I can't.
I find I just tilt it toward me when I'm talking, when I'm sitting in like where you are. No, you just tilt the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, on page 55, I believe you mentioned something in the budget about revenues.
Mhm.
Those won't be there next year, I gather, right? To the budget? It was funding.
Those assumptions really are, we have them for this current year to next year, but they are not guaranteed moving forward any other year.
Okay,
These are
so that'll be
assumptions. Right.
that'll change next year, potentially.
Potentially some of them could be there, like the Medicaid, for example, but the Eversource incentive will not be there. That was a
No.
one-time thing.
Okay. The other comment I have is that if you look on the page where it's mentioned about the revenue sources, I don't see anything getting any better next year. They're not going to be any better. The state has no money. The feds are $37 trillion in debt. And I don't think the town has many resources either. So what's going to change next year? We're going to be back here looking at another 5.8% increase probably. Because the revenue sources are drying up. You see that this year. So how many years can we do this? I think we need to have a quality discussion about education and how we fund it and how it's done here in Windham. That's a big part. And I think needs to be better communication between the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, the Town Council. I mean, years ago, we had a tri-board, which everyone got together. I don't know how, I don't remember how many times a year they met, but my impression is, only being on this board for 5 months, is everybody's going in different directions. No one's going in the same direction. So I think we need better communication between the boards. And I would let other people have questions, so.
May I just respond
Please,
to
go
that?
ahead. Go ahead.
I agree with you. I think it is very important for the major bodies of this town to communicate on a regular basis. And I think the Board of Ed would welcome some sort of ongoing way to check in with each other, the major boards. I do think, ever since we've had the new town manager in, I would say that Neil and I have probably met with him more in the short time that he's been town manager than we have met with the previous town manager on any regular basis. I also want to just sort of poke you a little bit about your assumption about the state not having money. The state has a lot of money. It's just decided to isolate it into some artificially agreed upon fiscal controls. And there is a lot of talk at the legislature about how to deal with this over the long run. And I understand that there may very well be a special session this year to discuss that. I don't want to argue that back and forth, but there is a lot of money that could be spent on meeting the basic needs of people in our communities through public education, through children's programs, through housing programs and healthcare programs, that there's a very vibrant discussion about that at the state level on. Now, I'm not saying that we should be setting a budget that assumes that we'll be getting X amount from the state. But I just wanted to just
Can I
take you
comment
on that? Yeah.
If the state has so much money, why are they taxing my electric bill 30%?
Well, that has a lot to do with the utility lobby.
Exactly.
Right. I was a lobbyist for 30 years at the Capitol. I understand how it works up there. And it's not pretty how some decision making is made.
Well, you've lost funding from the state this year, correct?
Yes, we did, mid-year. That's why we
Mid-year.
came to you with a request to help us make up the gap. But that's because it caught us off guard. We are trying to set a budget moving forward that assumes that certain things will be in place for 1 year, but not necessarily for every year moving forward. We are trying to do the best we can for all these wonderful people who are in the audience and all the students that they work for. Part of our job as the Board of Ed is to come and ask you for what we need. Then we know it's a process going forward from there. Tonight, we are presenting you with what we need, and that is our job as members of the Board of Ed.
Thank you, Lynn and Jay. We'll
I'd
go-
just like to say, we're all taxpayers too.
All right, who's next? Kevin, go ahead.
So a couple questions. I think this was somewhat answered by the answer ESSR, which by the way, I have no clue what that means. Can you kind of tell? I know it's ESSER funds, but
That's the COVID money.
that's the COVID money. Thank you.
Yeah, which was short term. We had to spend it down by a certain date. And one thing we're very proud of here in Windham is that unlike some other school districts around the state, we actually spent all of our ESSER money down in time, and we're not getting caught with millions of dollars that are going to be pulled back.
They're good spenders. So it's around the staff issue. The 10.3% increase in certified staff funds. It stands kind of in sharp contrast to the 1.5% increase in non-certified. And also, given the fact that the staff benefits were reduced by 488,000, the projected staff is reduced by 3%. And you lost 13.2 positions from the school. And I know I heard you say ESSER, but I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how this could go up so radically in light of those other numbers.
That's a great question. So positions that we kept that were previously funded in ESSER and that $500,000 shortfall. So that was X number of staff. I'll say 20. That 20 staff had to go somewhere and it went into the general fund. That 500,000 plus everything else, plus increases, plus the X number of dollars that was ESSER funding, plus the other now we're talking 1 point something million dollars of other funding. It generally all was funding our staffing overall. I don't want to say that. I think that's, I'm looking at Rita just to make sure it's not other categories, but that's why there's such a sharp increase in that category. Things that were funded by grants that don't exist, that $2 million shortfall, most of it was going towards categories 1, 2, and 3. And in those grants, there's rules and regulations for certified staff. So often those are the ones that get moved over where the higher percentage of our non-certified staff exist. They do exist in some grants, but for the most part, the higher percentage of them are already existing in our general fund budget. How would you say I did, Rita? All right, she's nodding her head, kind of good, so that's good.
She nodding? Was that a
Yes.
nod? Okay,
Yes.
excellent. Thanks, Rita. May I ask? So another question. The change in healthcare was kind of a sting to us. So I have a couple of questions on that. One is, are you receiving any incentives to make this move this year, which will not be repeated next year?
No,
Okay, I like those nice short answers.
that's a very short
Yeah,
answer,
that's
but
very
it's
short.
true.
Excellent. You're a good answer and spender. So you and you're seeing, did I see a $300,000 savings overall? Was that what I saw?
That's what we're projecting, the difference between if we stay in the self-insured plan through the town, with the rate increase that was proposed, that's the difference between that and going with the state.
And you would expect that to continue into the future?
Well, I mean, part of the beauty of the state plan is that it's much easier to budget on over time because it's such a large pool, the rate increases are more steady and they don't spike or go up in as drastic a way as in the past. I mean, we've been talking about this on and off, what, Mark, since 2014?
2022, yeah.
2014, 2015. Every year when we've looked at this decision, it hasn't been right. The math hasn't worked out. We have talked to you all as the Board of Finance, probably more than any other body in town. We had talked to the previous town manager about this, and he was generally, I would characterize at a Board of Finance meeting last year, very negative about the prospect of doing that with the town employees. At some point, we needed to make a decision about moving toward doing this, and we have been working very hard to do that. We put clauses in our contracts so that if the option came up, our employees would, through their bargaining units, be willing to have a conversation with us about that. That's what was referred to by Neil earlier. The other thing is that the timing of the rate, like finding out about the rates for whether it's the self-insured plan that the town and Board of Ed have been in together or going into the state self-insured plan, we never find out that information till right around the time when we're all putting together our budgets. Right? I mean, we didn't get the rates for this year until the first week in March, was it? Yeah, for the state plan until the first week in March. You may recall that years ago, the Windham Federation of Teachers, through its statewide affiliate, affiliated with AFT at the statewide level, issued a request to towns and boards of ed to move their employees into the state pool for better health care. For us, it's a question of retention. We've had a lot of complaints from employees in our district about the high deductible health plan, unlike Jim Rivers, who would speak wax poetically about the beauty of a high deductible health plan. Our employees don't feel that way. And when the opportunity came for us to save money on it this year, our board decided to move forward.
Can I ask when that decision was made since?
March 12th.
So before you met with us last time and we chatted about this, you knew it. We met, what,
March 19th, I think you're referring to about the healthcare fund.
About the health, before we met with you at your last Board of Finance meeting. And we asked for money to make up the difference in the shortfall that we had this year that we were caught off guard by. We made the decision we voted at our March 12th meeting to move forward.
I'll just say that I'm surprised you didn't tell us that. And to me, that's a bit of a breakdown in and what has been a very close relationship between the Board of Finance and the Board of Education.
I will say that in hindsight, we should have probably over-communicated about this process.
Any communication would have been adequate.
Mark, did you want to say something?
I guess, Kevin, we can debate when you knew or how you knew. I have emails that go back to 2022 that indicated we talked to Tyler and we talked to Jim, but that's neither here nor there. I think what we need to recognize is that there are options out of here. This is not a disaster for the town. Even by the memo I just read that you got from the town manager yesterday indicated that there are options. So I think what we need to do is focus on how we're going to accomplish this, how we're going to work together, because you have. Last year, we gave back the town $1 million for the health plan that I don't know where that money went, but there is room for us to discuss how to handle this situation. You guys moving to state plan with us, us maybe not moving to state plan, though that doesn't seem to be an option. And how we can help town can help finance the change. It is by far a much better plan. But I think rather than focus on whether I told you or didn't tell you, because I'm going to tell you I did tell you, you're going to tell me I didn't, we need to focus on how we're going to get through it.
There's no debate on when you told us, so that's neither here nor there. Is the plan finalized? Have you made a commitment on this, or is this still an open process?
we have told the state that we're intending to move over as of July 1st. And we are in the process of working with trying to get an appropriate consultant to help us with the transition and to work with the bargaining units on this. So we are intending on doing it. And as Mark said, I would concur completely with what Mark said, is that we can continue to have a conversation about what the options are. And I know that I will just say that there was nothing nefarious meant when we came to you on March 19th. It wasn't that we had a conversation and said, oh, let's not tell them. We just didn't tell you. It was an oversight.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate your foresight on the thought of it being an oversight. I will just add that when moving to the state plan, that option to alleviate any type of loss in the future using that is no longer an option that we have at our fingertips to aid in future years with you folks. Just
Correct.
something to keep in mind. Chuck, Peter, Marianne, Garnett. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I have a few questions. I confess that I don't really understand too much about the whole process, but first I'd like to start with the elementary schools in general. I'm trying to make sense. I compared the numbers to last year's proposed budget with regard to the overall budgets of the elementary schools. And I see, obviously, there's no Windham Center School for this year. And those students have to go to different schools. I mean, you know, I get that part, okay? But when I see, say, Sweeney School, unless I'm mistaken, there's a $471,000 savings between this year's proposed budget for Sweeney School and the one that was submitted last year. Is that true?
Rita?
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is last year to this year. It's very hard to compare the two because this is just general funds. It does not include all of the other revenue sources we receive, the grant funds and the other funds. So there could be movement of staffing into grant funds for next year and that aren't in this year.
So, okay, can you elaborate on that? Because I just don't understand how that lays out at the local school level.
So for example, Sweeney is, I believe, getting a net of 1 or 2 classrooms to its total overall enrollment. I think it'll be somewhere between 30 to 40 more students, but it could be next year. In terms of general fund, it appears they have, and again, I'm not going to sit there and look at everything, but they could theoretically have 6, 7 fewer teachers in general fund because we've moved those staff positions into grants. It depends on the nature of the position and the
Okay.
program.
Thank you.
What? Yeah, right. And then, yes. And then actually, I thought the question was going to come about the middle school because you're going to see a huge net change of, I think it's 20 plus teachers.
Yeah.
And that's to support the 5th grade moving there.
Okay, all right. Similarly along those lines, and I thought, I noticed there's a $753,000 increase to the proposed budget for North Windham School. And I just figured that made more sense to me because I figured that they're going to absorb more kids from the closing of Windham Center School. Is that reasonable to assume?
Of the elementary schools, they'll receive, actually, the net change in students is 0 almost because they have about 80 students moving to the middle school and they're receiving about 80 students roughly from Windham Center. The net increase there could be more of the staff positions we just talked about are now in general fund.
Okay.
And it could also speak to some of the specialized programming or other things as well.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions. Is that okay? So I'm going to go over to for the same, using the same business where I compare one. It might not be the right thing to do, but it's kind of the only thing I had to do. So comparing the proposed budget from last year to this year, when we get to employee benefits number 3, when it comes to group insurance, last year the proposed budget for group insurance was $5,995,000, and this year it's $7,779,000, which is an increase of $1,783,000. Does that sound right to you, or?
Yes.
Well, I know 500,000 of it, we carried over 2% last year of our general fund budget. 500,000 of that 2% went towards benefits. So the 1.7 million you're speaking of, 500,000 of that was in our 2% carryover.
So can you explain to me what that means to?
Yeah, we're not going to have a 2% carryover in our assumptions this year.
Okay.
We had
Thank
it
you.
last year.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Does everybody get that? Right.
Go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yep. So we are allowed, if we have the money at the end of a year, working with the Board of Finance, we have been allowed to set aside 2% up to carry over into the next year to help with that year's budget. We were able to do that over the past 4 budget cycles. We aren't now. We don't have the money to do that this year, so we're not proposing the 2% carryover for this budget.
Okay. Thanks. Just a couple more, and then I'm done. When I look at the employee benefits from the last 2 proposed budgets, under the FICA Medicare, there's an increase of $415,000. That's 35% between the proposed budget. Is that, and I'm just trying to figure out, okay, does that mean that we're going to be hiring more people? And is that, I'm just trying to figure out why we would have that kind of an increase in a 5.8% budget increase. I mean, can you explain that?
Yes, not necessarily. We do rely a lot on grant funding to offset some of our benefit costs, and one of those costs is FICA. So if our grant funding decreases, our credits to the general fund from the grants, part of it's FICA, part of it's health insurance, are less. I'm hoping you understand that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, but I think I understand it.
Grants pays for salaries, it pays for benefits, and when we get lower grants, the general fund has to pick up a higher percentage.
Okay, so along those same lines, when I look at the employee benefits and I see that when it comes to fringe benefits, a 127% increase from 342,000 to 780,000. Is that similarly because the grants are being washed up and now we're trying to absorb it in the general budget?
Correct. That some of that increase is because of lost revenue from grants.
Okay, thank you.
It's very complicated, you know, how the grants offset our general fund need.
Kevin, you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
So let me understand this, following your description to Peter. So when you lose these grants, the benefits have to go back to the general fund. In other words, it increases your costs.
It increases the cost to the general fund. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and there is the way I understand it, there are different formulas with different grant programs. So it's not all like a one size fits all on how much we can charge to the grant program. It is very specific. And Rita has to do a lot of tracking to figure out what we can allocate to the grant and what we have to pay for out of our general fund.
I think Rita's got a lot of hard work to do. So in general, though, the cost of these benefits has been moving because of these various machinations have been moving to the general fund, in other words, into this budget. How does it come? Did I misunderstand what I saw? I saw a staff benefit reduction of 500,000, not an increase.
That's in the proposed budget. We are assuming, one of our assumptions is because we are lowering the FTE 13.2,
Don't say what that is, FTE.
of the full-time equivalent. We reduced our full-time staff by 13 positions. We are assuming that the benefits will decrease as well. So that's one of our assumptions, yes.
Okay, so you have two different forces moving in opposite directions.
Correct.
Thanks.
All right, I think Chuck's ready to go.
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Peter stole most of my thunder because I did the same thing he did. I went compared last year to this year. Couple things. One thing that did stand out, I don't know whether it was answered with Peter or not, but in North Windham, certified teachers went up $500,000 and non-certified went up 200,000. Oh, look, 200, almost 250. But you only had an increase of about 25 students. And that was the biggest one of all your schools, the biggest increase in certified teachers and non-certified. What happened?
So basically what we were saying before, it's a shift of grants. Like, so in other words, some of those positions, the reason there was the increase, even though there's 25 students, the positions that we're paying for them now are in general fund, which will be a greater burden to the general fund or a greater percentage to the general fund than it was last year. Last year it wasn't there because it was in one of our major grants or a grant source. Yeah.
I can do an analysis of those schools that, if you want me to, of the FTEs and why the dollar went up. It can be because higher paid teachers are in that school now, and they were in a different school prior. It could be a multitude of factors, but I can look into the certain schools if you'd like me to.
But that's such a drastic increase compared to the other schools, even the high school. Yeah, it just stood out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, what we will do is, I think actually, because you're asking, I think we'll take a look at it and then in a future meeting, be able to explain that better to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll just conclude with, been on this board too many years, and going through too many sessions here. I'm getting old. No, I am old. The last 4 or 5 years, we've been giving increases to the school, and you've been coming in under budget, as you mentioned. You're asking for another increase, and I'm not sure. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not comfortable with the increase over the past, compared to, you had, last year you got what, 2 million that you were under? And you got an increase of, I forget the number now, but you got an increase.
8.58%.
Yeah, which you were talking, probably you got an overall increase with the 2 million, maybe 6-7% increase. And last year, go ahead, you can.
Say, so you're talking about the 2% set aside? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, for the last several years, you've been coming in 1-2 million under budget.
So this year, we do not anticipate that happening. We do have some available funds, like when Christian runs his report every month. But if Christian's been watching, if I was drawing a graph or being a math nerd, it's approaching zero as the year goes out. We anticipate not having those funds anymore. And just remember, amidst the 3.58% increase, we lost 2.8 million last year. We actually are operating with a total fund budget that's negative compared to the year before. So I absolutely hear what you are saying. A 5.8 is a big ask, but it's based on, just like we said, to give our students what they need. But I appreciate your point in your question.
If I can just jump in for a second. Correct. Last year, we have a 3.8 increase, and you said we came in 2 million under budget. That wasn't a 8% increase, that was a 3.8. We budgeted with grants and with our budgeting, we're able to not spend $2 million of that 3.8, which we returned to the town. The taxpayers didn't lose any money, we didn't over ask. We were able to come in under budget, but all that money went back to the town. It's not money that we kept, it's not money that is lost. It's money that could be used for taxpayer reductions last year. When we went up, and as Jay pointed out, we had a large tax increase last year. We could have used some of that 2 million that the town, that the Board of Ed returned to the town to reduce that tax increase. So Chuck, it's not that you gave us 3.8 and we gave you back 2 million and you added it together and came up with 6% increase. That's not the case. You gave us 3.8, we underspent it by 2 million, we gave it back to you. So you actually gave us less of the 3.8 increase because I gave you back 2 million.
Mark, I disagree with you. We set up a special account for the Board of Ed to use in this budget year. It wasn't that the town took your $2 million and put it in the general fund.
Well, we're talking about the set aside. The set aside is different than underspending and returning money to the town, which we've done.
I just want to stay on topic real quick, and not stray too far away from this budget, but I think what I'm trying to, just to clarify so we can move on and keep it going, but I just want to understand, make sure I understand Chuck, and then maybe we can talk about it on another note just to get us going. But the last couple of years, like you said, we've given slight increases to the Board of Education, and yet those years they still come in under budget. Mark's point's right. Return some money to us, but we still giving them increases, although they've come in under. And so like, it doesn't, like that doesn't make sense to us where we're asking for an increase, but over the last years have come in under. So we're trying to understand where an increase is asked, but you don't spend it all, essentially. So.
Well, we try to be very good with our budgeting, and we're asked, when we make a budget request, we're asking for what we think we need. Sometimes things work out in a different way during the course of the year. There are positions that end up being unfilled. The ESSER funding during the COVID period of time provided us with substantial ways to move money around within our budget and stay within compliance with ESSER, but that is gone now. So we don't foresee, I mean, part of the reason we're not coming in with under budget at the end of this year and projecting the 2% set aside for next year is because of all those factors that we've been talking about. The grant funding, we don't have as much leeway in our budget, and loss of funding sources that we didn't expect that came in mid-year. And given the way things are going at the federal level and potentially at the state level, we may end up thinking we're going to be getting some money and not getting it.
And the last 3 years, Tyler, were an exception because of all that COVID money that was out there. Even the town, I'm sure, benefited in ways and came in under budget because there was such a plethora of grant money. We're not going to have that money coming forward.
And the last thing I just want to add, historically, and we could do like a better answer of this. A few years ago, we actually asked for a 0, and in our trying to have a better, I remember, because you said it was the only time you voted yes for a budget. It's just remembering, just having a fond memory. So when we did that, we actually gave money back that year when we did 0, because we were trying to be responsible because we had access to the ESSER funds. Instead of burn out our general funds, we knew we had access to that money. So we've done that as well too. I just want to add that to the complexity of the years. We did get increases. There were years where we got a 0 as well.
And Chuck, I remember when you and I were on the Board of Finance together that you actually did vote for some budgets. You did vote for some budgets because there were some unanimous votes. So you must have voted for it.
Thank you.
I guess I may have. I'm not, I may have been new on the board back then and didn't know what I was doing.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll give you that grace.
Marianne, oh, go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing? I wanted to, so I went through the budget book and then I let my daughter go through it and compare, who's 15, by the way, last year's and this year's. Between us, we have a lot of Post-it notes, and some of these questions have been answered from the discussion from my colleagues here. I have some random questions, and I would love to be able to report back to Abigail what these
We
answers.
really want to know what her 15-year-old analysis is and
She
what she has
said-
questions about.
It was like 9 o'clock at night and she said, "This is interesting." And I said, "Future budget finance director, watch out, Christian. She might succeed you." She's a few years in the making. But so on this year's budget, page 70, last 4 digits or last 5 digits are 54410. No, that's not right. I'm sorry. What is the building rental for? There's a line item for building rental. It went up, a
Yeah.
certain percentage this year from.
Well,
compared to
one
last
of
year.
our programs, the Phoenix Academy, is not housed in one of our school buildings. It's housed in a building that's owned by a landlord, and we pay rent for it.
Thank you. So that was that was one of the questions. We did note a lot of the shifting in fringe benefits, by the way. She was very attuned to that. And also the shifting of just salaried employees. And thank you for the explanation. I have a lot to explain to her. The whole section on tuition, could you break that down for me a little bit more? This section 08.
What page are you on?
Hold on a second, 72. Okay.
Okay. You want to explain the? Yeah, tuition is something we talk about a lot at our monthly finance and audit committee meetings, and Rita is on top of it.
Thank you.
So there's several different types of tuition. Is that what you're asking about on that page?
A lot of tuition compared to last year's tuitions, things went up. Of course, it's probably because there's more students or less
Like
students.
some are
in
special ed, some are regular ed. Do you have a specific line?
No, it's just really trying to understand like private agency, is that a special ed?
Yes.
Okay,
Private agencies
and
placed.
tuition placement, I guess?
That's public place, the second one.
Okay,
Yes, that's who we place, Windham places. There's a lot of, and other could be placed by, have to, tuition other is probably regular ed. Yes, that's regular ed, like adult ed
Okay,
and crack and, magnet schools. So
Okay.
they're all
and the VOAG is. the
VOAG is
voca- Is
yeah.
that, okay.
is
Well,
EOS
thank- Okay, all right, so that's for out of,
out, yeah.
does the state reimburse the district? I was under the impression that for alliance districts, the state reimbursed for magnet school placement. Do you see that?
This
Or is
year,
it just
The
bundled?
formula changed for magnet
Okay.
tuition. It did change, so the state is funding more through the Barrows Magnet Grant, a little bit more, yes.
Okay,
So
but I thought if in district, yes.
She's asking if a student is from Windham and goes to a magnet school outside of the district. how do we get reimbursed for that?
There's not a reimbursement.
I understood there was for many years, so, okay, that's news to me.
No, that's an issue.
That is an issue. I will ask about that then. I thought that certain districts, maybe not defined as alliance, but distressed municipalities were held harmless, which meant the state reimbursed. No,
No.
thank you. It's good to know. Let me see what else she wrote. Yes, she was very attentive about the workers' compensation and I wish this budget, which is very beautiful to look at, compared side by side last year's and this year's. I know that room is, but even the columns are not in the same order, which made it really challenging to compare the two. I just thank you for your work. I acknowledge that a lot of time was put in here, but I wish it was easier to read.
I understand.
I understand that budgets for me are a story. I know that sounds nerdy, big nerd, but it is harder to imagine the story behind the numbers in this particular setup because the code, I mean, I understand it's the coding, but comparing the two, I mean, Jay didn't have the advantage of being on the board last year, so he didn't get to compare this year's and last year's, and it's hard to imagine what things are being used for without that story being told.
Yeah, I do want to say, yes, the sorting was different this year because of a comment last year that all of the like departments weren't together. So that's why I resorted, but that's good feedback that I could always put last year's projected.
It would be so much easier to read.
I've made a note. We can take that
Thank
into
you.
account for next year.
Thank you.
Garnet, do you have any questions before I recycle through at this point? All right, Jay, go ahead.
Just a quick question on the the Barrows School. Why is there a reduction in the tuition this year? I think there was a $500,000 less than last year
You're talking on the
on
revenue
the
page?
Barrows Academy.
On the revenue page?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's because, well, we have had carryovers and the formula changed that they capped us on what we can charge out of town students. So that's why it decreased as well. Not only did it decrease because we don't have a carryover, but it decreased because they capped us to 56%, I believe. There was a percentage cap on all magnet schools, and they created a new formula for the grant part of it.
Okay. So what's the capacity of the Barrows? Is it 600?
It runs at roughly around 540. If each school was maxed out, if you did with our staff preferences, the way the lottery works, you could theoretically have close to around 590 students, but we run around 540 because of the lottery rules in district versus out of district.
So you're
There's-
still doing the lottery?
Yes.
You are, okay.
Yes.
So we're not at full capacity.
No, in order to be at full capacity, we'd have to change policies.
Okay.
And that wouldn't necessarily generate the revenue you're looking for. The policy would have to be changed as such, with that being the goal in mind.
Mhm. Okay, just one other question on the budget. I kind of
you wanna
agree
say
with
something
Mary Ann.
about
I'm
the-
sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think we're within 10 students of the out of town.
We were, okay. I kind of agree with Mary Ann about the budget. I'm using the Phoenix Academy because when I got the budget, I knew that there was rent or lease payment somewhere. So to get a true reflection of what that program costs, it's not $870,000 or $800,000. It's $140,000 more. Plus, it doesn't include benefits as well. So the true cost of the program is what, $1 million, $2 million? I don't really know what the cost is. So that's that. Just to follow up on what she said, and that could go through with any of the other departments here. It doesn't cover benefits. It doesn't cover electricity. Does a Board of Ed have, you have electricity, right? It's nowhere in any one of these pages that I can find.
Utility costs.
The
We heat our schools, I assume.
operations and maintenance of the building.
Yeah, that's not including in, I mean, to me, it should be included in the high school budget, electricity, heat. It should be a comprehensive budget, but it's not
I
anywhere.
believe
in
the
middle
operation
school.
of the maintenance and buildings is included,
It's
like
included,
Natchog, it's number 11. I'm just looking at Natchog, has operations of maintenance and building. The reason why Phoenix, and I can take that note, the reason why Phoenix is not on their page is because Phoenix Academy has two separate programs, AWP and Core, and the rent is in a centralized account. So I could, from your feedback, put
I'm
it.
just saying it
yeah.
just should be presented better in the budgets, that's all.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
As the town is, they do it with the library, recreation center. So all the costs are included, so we know what that program cost. Just one last thing I want to talk about is that since being back on the board, and this is more directed at our board, last year in this year's budget, the town has used, almost $1 million this year and $1 million last year from the undesignated fund balance. So we cover our costs and an increase in spending by offsetting our budget, taking money of our funds, but we don't afford that to the Board of Education. We've never done that. And I think that's something that we should be a little bit more concerned about. And the same thing with all the monies that's been returned to the Board of Education, that the Board of Ed has returned to the town. My impression was that money was put in accounts that could only be used for the Board of Ed. And I guess that's not the case. We've taken money out of the medical fund, which it's not the best way to do business. So I think the Board of Ed's been shortchanged on that.
Thank you for your comment, Jay. I appreciate that.
All right. Any other questions, follow-ups? Chuck, go ahead.
I forget, when are you moving the 5th grade to the middle school?
The 5th grade will be moved out of all the elementary schools and back in the middle school for the start of the next school year. So in this budget.
Well, I noticed in your booklet, well, first of all, I saw the substantial increase in, again, the certified teachers and non-certified, but I assumed it was because you were moving the kids over. But in your booklet, it keeps referring to each elementary school K through 5.
It's, I think partly because currently it's K to 5. Next year it will be K to 4. I apologize for the confusion. Next year you won't have the issue because we'll know it's K to 4. But it was just because we were describing current versus next year. And so there could have been some confusion on our part. So sorry for that.
That's right, and that includes the number of kids in each school, because what you have is projecting for K through 5.
I think when I look at the current enrollment, that is current. The enrollments.
Wait, talking to the mic.
Sorry.
Sorry,
You think I would know it's my home
I
turf.
can't hear it anyhow.
That's right. It basically is the current projection, like as of today. We didn't, the projection on the school pages, I think that you're talking about.
Yes,
Like on the home page, where it shows the picture of the school, that is the current enrollment,
is what,
is the current enrollment.
in current,
Yeah,
Okay.
current as in today, or like a month ago when we made this.
okay.
But I hear what you're saying for the budget book for next year. I'm writing notes. It should be for the projected year, right?
All right. Anyone else? I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to wait till last, as is, Kevin. Oh, man, I was ready to go.
Sorry, I'm sure I'm not stealing your thunder. I just wouldn't feel fulfilled if I didn't ask this one last question. How many open positions are there now in the school?
We'd have to get that to you. I don't know off the top of my head. I know many things, but not that.
How are they accounted for in the budget book?
In the budget book, we projected our budgets based on the staff being fully filled. Actually,
We have
well, that's what I was to get to. We have the Kevin Donahue rule, which is the 3% attrition that is actually in the assumptions. We accounted for that.
Okay, is that, and I would be curious to know whether that's roughly what you have now. In other words, are you accounting for the number of open positions that you actually have?
We'll look into it.
Do you understand?
I
the
understand
question?
what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You're done. Wrong.
All right. Thank you. I think a lot of my questions were answered in understanding that funds that, or a lot of the increases to the taxpayers portion of our bill was formerly covered by grants, either through ESSER or the state funding that you're losing. And I think there was a pie chart that came up on the screen during the presentation that went over those percentages of what's owed to the town or what the town pays into. And of course, I had it on my little notepad here. Oh, the town pays about 39.2%. So can I just ask that over the next couple of weeks that last year's percentage or what that our breakdown was, so we could really see how much was in ECS, how much was in grants? It's right. Yeah.
You're talking about the chart that's on page 12, and you'd like a breakdown for
looked
what
like
it was
last
last year?
Yeah, then what we can get a percentage idea of what the burden has shifted over to the taxpayers, and that, piecemealing it here together, I think that's kind of been a lot of the general comments here is, hey, there's an increase here. It's from the burden being shifted onto the taxpayers from the loss of the fundings, either through multitude of grants that the funding has changed from. And then the one other thing I found interesting during the statements was that teacher retention has improved by 5%. So do we have a rough number on what 5% looks like, or?
So it's a roughly close to, it's like 18, I think, but it's about 20 teachers more are staying, are retaining 5 years after they work here.
I'm sorry, what?
So the 5-year retention rate is
Got
what
it.
percentage of staff that are working 5 years after they start employment in Windham.
Understood. Okay. I guess my last comment would be is that sounds a little contrary to something that was discussed about the insurance plan and how one of the issues with retention was the insurance costs, and yet we've seen quite the increase in retention over the last 5 years. So I'm just trying to make that make sense in my head.
That's a great question. Just, the overall 5-year retention rate increased from 47 to 52%. I would argue that those are both really low numbers, and with the insurance, we would get it much higher, in my opinion.
Very good. So that 5% was from 47 to 52. Very good. Thank you. That helps clears that up a lot.
I mean, we've been working very hard in Windham Public Schools to offer pay and benefits that will keep people here rather than have them leave and go to another district where they could easily get paid $15,000 more, $20,000 more, depending. And we've seen, I would say that part of the decrease, the better retention has had to do with our gradual, our work to gradually increase the pay and benefits for our staff. One of the biggest keys to success is retaining good teachers. And if we have turnover a lot, it's a bigger issue, right? Because that means you're training more people, you're acclimating more people, whatever. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And like I said, the 5% doesn't, it's great, but when you say it's 47 to 52, that lessens my thought process on it. So thank you for that. All right. So without any further questions, I just would like to invite you folks to our next regular meeting in 2 weeks, where we'll, like I said, come up with our final, not final, but we'll set a budget before the public hearing, which would occur after that meeting. So that way folks have citizens have time to marinate and think about what that looks like. But therefore, if there's any questions, or I know there's some follow-up that we have, you can always respond in email, and, we'll get it out there, but you're more than welcome to come to our meeting in case there's any follow-ups. But I think we're all satisfied at this point in time with questions. But I'll let you give any kind of.
Tyler, so real quickly, so the 16th of April will be the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's our regular meeting, folks. So that has to be at the Bellingham because it's a regular meeting and we can't change that location.
We'll be present for that. And just, have you been talking about, have you set the date for the referendum yet?
No, it's always tricky in the biennium, right? Because the state hasn't solidified anything yet. So by charter, we have to have the referendum by the second Tuesday in May, but we also now have the ability to delay that depending on, well, really, it's not depending on, it's just depending on us. We can make a vote to delay it, but we typically would limit that to if we were really unsure of the state's funding for either the town or Board of Ed, that we would delay that. So we could always set that date. We'll probably have to set that date on the 16th, and then we can always change it at a special meeting later on.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll make sure, Tyler, that I share the presentation with you
you.
electronically to share with your board, and my email address is there. So if you have any questions before then, please email me and it'll give our team time to put together, hopefully, answers that satisfy what you need.
Absolutely. And my board knows to email me questions and I'll move them along either here or for the town government from that point of view. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Since this is not a regular Board of Finance meeting, but I do always offer an opportunity for public comment. So this is the time for that. So anyone in the public would like to come up and say anything, please come up to the lovely mic and podium we have. I'll give folks a moment to do that if they'd like to do that. Just state your name and address for the record, please. But I know you know that, but.
Curtis Ayler, 8 Fairway Drive. Comparing Windham's school budget to other surrounding towns. I was able to watch superintendents that delivered proposed budgets to their boards of ed in late February, early March, prior to the governor's office decision to come to an agreement on state funding for special ed. I saw a dramatic reduction, usually around a percentage point, in the proposed budgets of those surrounding towns before and after the governor's office move on special education funding. That contrasts to the town of Windham, where the superintendent's proposed budget prior to the governor's office announcement came in at 5.99%, and then now is being delivered to you at 5.8. When the Board of Ed, if I remember correctly from reading the Chronicle, forgive me if the Chronicle misquoted the Board of Ed, it was asking for a target of 5.5. Because Windham Public Schools has so many students that need specialized programs, I had expected a similar reduction in the budget from the initial proposed superintendent's delivered budget to what would come here today. I'm sure there's a good reason why, but as a member of the public, I'm just curious for some information about why we didn't see the sort of reduction that other surrounding towns that then saw after the governor's action. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Anybody else? All right, Board of Finance comment. Anyone, any final comments from the Board of Finance? I will then take a motion to adjourn. Kevin, I will close our meeting at 8:38. Thank you again, Board of Ed and Windham High School and everyone here. Appreciate it.